Welcome to the Paramedic AF Show with your hosts, Dan and Michelle. We hope you've come prepared to be challenged, offended, and encouraged. We are here to create a better future for the entire EMS industry. We have changed or omitted names of individuals in order to protect the innocent, the guilty, and the incompetent. We believe that knowledge fuels power, ignorance is not bliss, and nothing will change until we abandon the status quo. This is our design. Welcome to the show. And welcome to the Paramedic AF Show. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Michelle.
And we're here for our first Q&A episode.
So we have been asking y'all for a little while now to send us your questions about things just for us to talk about. That's kind of a change of pace of some of the heavy stuff that we do. And we have had enough people, I don't want to put a number to it, but people reach out on actually multiple different platforms, Instagram, Facebook, private messaging, and even the commenting, asking us certain questions to talk about. So we've chosen 4 people, and it's going to be a mix of EMS and non-EMS people for some of the basic questions. Now, for EMS people, some of these may seem a little basic. Some of them you might be able to relate to, and some of y'all have asked some very good field type questions. So we'll kind of break into that. First, we're gonna talk about 3 questions sent in by Cameron. He's from Kearns, Utah, and as far as we know, he is non-EMS. And the first question is, why did you go into this field?
So, we've talked about this, at various depths, but the real first thing that got me interested in EMS was actually back home in Virginia. I had a friend who, he was older than me, so he was actually one of my older brother's good friends for a long time. But then when he and my older brother got out of high school, they kind of parted ways, and then I caught up with him again when I was going to community college. And he was a volunteer firefighter EMT, and pretty much everything in Virginia, other than like some of the city fire departments, is all volunteer. All EMS is volunteer up there. And he was an interesting fella, and I miss him, and I kind of wish I could talk to him now, because he's one of those people that I wish we could help, because he had a lot of mental health issues from the job and had struggled with a lot of stuff that he saw. I've tried to find him. I don't know where he's at in life, honestly. I honestly don't know if he's still alive. I mean, that's my level of concern. But anyway, he and I would sit, and he would tell me stories about all the crazy shit that they would do. And I just thought it was fascinating. And I almost went and took the EMT course there in Virginia, because the rescue squad was going to teach it for free. But I didn't. And so I kind of put it on the back burner. I was like, I never really considered it as like a career. But then after I moved to South Carolina, got introduced to some people that did EMS professionally, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I really liked the idea of helping people, and I really liked the idea of the variety of it, that you didn't know what you were going to get every day. And I still appreciate that little bit of suspense you have in the day of just not really knowing if shit's going to break off or if it's just going to be stubbed toes and belly aches all day. You just really don't know, and I do appreciate that. There's certain kinds of repetition I do well with, and certain kinds I don't. So I mean, for me, it was a drive to genuinely want to help people, and I think it just fit my personality really. My mentality has adapted very well to this job.
I do just want to note in here real quick, if you hear a screaming animal in the background, it's our very talkative Calico screaming for our other cat.
She's screaming for both of them now. It's not just like a guy-girl thing. Like, she literally just wants to be heard.
She wants attention. And if you meow at her, she'll meow back. Daniel did it for like 10 minutes the other night. It was hilarious. But I'm sorry, I sidestepped. So why did I get into the field? So I guess...
yell at kitties.
Stop. No, to adopt all the kitties, apparently. So I was raised in a heavily military family. My father was actually the only one of his siblings that didn't go military or medical. So, like, my uncle in the military and medical with, like, no lie, probably 4 or 5 bachelor, master's degrees combinations in there. I mean, he went to school forever. And my mother went into the legal field. So, all through high school and everything, me and my best friend, we were going to be teachers. We were going to live together. We had a path. And, life happened. We grew apart. And I fell on the spectrum of choosing between legal and medical. And as much as I liked, and when I say legal, I mean like becoming an attorney. And as much as I liked the the arguing and the having to do the research and all the rest of
You
it,
still do, but it's okay.
well, I know I was very good at debate when in high school and everything. I did youth and government, all the things, but I fell on the medical path, and I actually started with my CNA because it was a very short course. It was something I could do quickly and make, I mean, decent money. I mean, it pays similarly to EMT. And ultimately, I decided I'm going to be a nurse. I want to go get my, at minimum, RN, and I wasn't even entirely sure where I would fall from there. But because of life and situation, I had initially tried to go into the military. But after I had my daughter, like 8 months later, I needed another emergency abdominal surgery, and the military at that time said, because this was your second major surgery, we can't take you right now. You have to wait X amount of time. And that put me over a new year where they were no longer taking people with dependents. So honestly, I ended up doing EMT initially because I was like, well, I need to be able to do like a certification stepping stone, basically. So I was like, I can get my EMT, work as an EMT while I go to paramedic, work as a paramedic while I'm bridging over to RN. I was like, I got this. Well, I got on the truck and I was like, oh my God, I love the changes in circumstances, not always, dispatchers try their hardest, but depending on whether they're good or bad at their job or the information given to them, you don't always know what you're going into regardless of call notes. Like, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hating on anybody. It's a combination of all kinds of craziness
Oh,
throughout
yeah.
the world.
Well, and some people outright admit that they make up stuff to tell dispatch to get you there faster. So I mean,
Yeah.
you have no way to know.
Oh no, 100%. So I mean, and I learned that, I guess you could say, adrenaline junkie, but as we've talked before with, the PTSD and everything, I function better under high stress. So I, continued as an EMT, went to paramedic school, and honestly, doing hospital clinicals gives me so much respect for nurses. But I decided that is not something for me. Like, at least not right now in my life. That may change later on. But, for a different work environment. And it's so funny. I go back and forth now where I am between, like, oh, today I want to run an interfacility, critical care calls. Like, I want all the complex meds and, all the things. And there are some days where I'm like, give me, the 911 belly aches. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It just, I don't know. It's almost like an emotion that I can't describe whether I want to do this or that, which is why I like having the variety of both, because both are super important. And again, all the respect to nurses, just right now in my life, that's not for me. So I guess you could say I was kind of born into it and have just kind of followed that path.
So the second question that we have from Cameron is, who is a good fit for this field? And this is, I feel like this is kind of a loaded question in a way. And obviously, we've talked so much about, the core values and all that stuff, and it's important for people to embrace this mentality. But I think if you really want to boil it down to archetypes of people that can do well in this field, the one category of people that really don't do well is what I would call more the beta personalities. And I know that's often used in a derogatory way, and I don't mean it that way, but the folks who are super agreeable and not confrontational and are just generally more passive in life. And again, if that's you, that's cool. This is not a knock on you. Just the demands of this job, and whether you're a paramedic or an EMT, you need to be able to really just pull your balls out and throw them on the table and tell people the way things are going to be. You have to be able to function well under pressure, to be able to respond to a number of different demands and changing circumstances all the time. And you do need to have a certain sense of, not self-importance, but your ego does need to be active in your career. It doesn't need to be the driving thing, but it needs to be active. You need to have a level of dominance that you exert in a healthy way to just be able to survive running calls. So
I think a certain level of type A personality as well. Because, I mean, you have to be able to follow, algorithms and be able to have that order and independence under high stress. Now, don't get me wrong. I say we, I'm sure you've seen it with students and new hires in the field. But I will say the reason I wouldn't discount the quote unquote beta or more agreeable, calm, quiet is another one. Now, there are times that, we're quiet, soft spoken, to Graham or,
yeah,
a child or whatever. But there are times where you have to be I want to say louder, but it's not like you're yelling, like, the firm voice in
yeah,
the situation. But I will say we've seen it with new hires and students where they may start out as kind of the quieter, sort of kind of maybe betas, but as they get into the field and get with good partners and everything, they find their voice. I actually have a student currently in school. I had her through EMT school. And she was so soft spoken. I mean, so soft spoken. I mean, I don't think I ever heard her cuss. She absorbed everything like a freaking sponge. And I mean, she still does. But now that she's been working in the field and is in paramedic school, I mean, she has found her feet and she will speak up. She will talk to patients like unprompted. Hun, not taking your meds is not a good thing. Let's talk
yeah.
about what we can do for you now. Like, not that I thought she would fail to begin with, just we do see people that maybe start off a little bit quieter as they're observing, and then they find their own feet as they go. So it's a very hard question to kind of answer because there's no real like set criteria.
Well, there's a difference between people who are kinder people in general versus the folks who are so passive that it's almost debilitating. Because I've seen them, and I think the distinguishing characteristic with what you're talking about is someone who actually cares, someone who cares about doing the job right, and about becoming what the job needs. And I know that sounds very romantic or whatever, but you do see people that grow and morph. I grew and morphed into this. I was not always the same kind of personality that I am now. I did have to grow into this, but because I cared about it, I really, really, really wanted to become what I needed to be for this job. And not just shitting on the betas too, because the people who are always dominating and loud and all of that and don't know how to turn it off, that's equally bad. Because you're going to get people pulling guns on you more often. You're going to get people that want to fight more often. Patients are going to be less likely to engage with you. You're going to hinder yourself. So, no, it's you really want to avoid either extreme. The alphas tend to survive longer and better in this job because they tend to be have a just in general their personality is more survivable, but it's not healthy regardless to just be that way.
And I mean, we'll probably have an episode or something at some point talking about the different like the 5 different personality types. But you talking about that actually struck me as something. I think the true like, well, and even this can change, but like the true innocent, naive, tender-hearted people that can't even squish an ant. This job might end up hurting, if that makes sense.
I can see that, yeah. Well, and that kind of leads into the third question here, too.
Yes. Yeah, so go ahead.
So the third question we have from Cameron is, how do you deal with the emotional trauma of losing someone you are helping? I think you and I both are kind of similar in this, but you go first in as far as how you would answer this question.
Well, it as I always tell students and it kind of irritates them, depends. Honestly, children are going to hit most of us harder than other people. But outside of like feeling empathy and internalizing like over a child, like because we are parents and feeling that a little bit differently, the I guess I don't want to say solution, but like how I handle that is like, us calling the kids or
Mm-hmm.
coming home and crying on each other's shoulders and then like hugging the kids and enjoying life, appreciating that our kids are alive and feeling empathy for the parents. But to be completely honest, if it's any other age group, I, I feel nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
that sounds horrific, I mean, to people that don't understand. And I fully acknowledge that that is not the healthy way to compartmentalize. And I mean, we've talked about trauma and disassociating and compartmentalization and how we should handle the traumas. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, for me, I feel like I have kind of a skewed ability. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but I mean, when I call time of death on somebody, I, I mean, there's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no. I mean, I feel. What is it? I feel sympathy for the family, but I don't empathize. I don't internalize that
Mm-hmm.
loss. And that's where I think we need to draw the distinction. I can sympathize with plenty of situations, the death, whether it's traumatic or natural or whatever, I can sympathize with that. But the biggest thing is not empathy. Don't internalize all of that loss.
Well, I think sometimes it's our ability to compartmentalize can be painted in a negative light, and I don't see it that way. I think because I'm very much like you. Obviously, kids hit you a little different, and I don't get pediatric calls all the time, but usually when I have a really 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 bad one, well, and this just goes to show how long it's been because Kaylee and Declan I don't think have been around since I've really had a bad pediatric call. But like I would always call my son and wouldn't tell him what was going on, or at least not tell him any details. Just, hey buddy, I'm having a rough day at work and I just wanted to talk to you, see how you're doing. And for me that was enough just to know that in my world, in my space, what I cared about was okay. For your other population groups, I knew even in high school that I had to have some abilities with this because I originally wanted to go into law enforcement.
Mm.
Back all through high school, that was like my thing. I wanted to do law enforcement so bad, and for a couple of reasons that just didn't pan out, and I'm glad it didn't, given the state of political bullshit that is going on in this country. I would not want to be working in law enforcement, especially not where I grew up near DC. But I see the ability to compartmentalize as a good thing. I don't think that everyone can do it. I think,
At least not well.
well, yes, I think you have to, there's an aspect of it that can be taught, but there's a certain aspect of it you just either can do it or you can't.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it, if you can not internalize that trauma, awesome. Awesome. And I look at it as I conserve my emotional energy. I save that for the things that, for the people that are closest to me that matters.
It's awesome if you can compartmentalize effectively, but it's still a matter of, like we talked about in the personal wellness episode, you have to be able to deal with it in a healthy manner. It's not just dealing with it on or immediately after the call. It's like the continuation of it.
I guess, and maybe I'm just a little weird with this, because to me, the worse off a patient is, the more I truly look at them as a mannequin. And especially you folks that aren't EMS are going to hear that and think that's cruel and that's cold. But that to me is the only way to. It's not even that I'm like, quote, dealing with trauma. It's truly just deflected off of me. Like I don't look at someone with, half of their head split open and have nightmares about it. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just.
But to some providers that would cause it. So I think that's when it comes down to the provider as a whole, their ability to compartmentalize, but also healthy coping. But unfortunately, there have been some times, and again, this is going to sound awful to, the non-EMS people, but I mean, okay, there was one call at the peak of COVID, call out for cardiac arrest at a nursing home. It was
You had cardiac arrest? No.
God damn it. That is another example. I'm sorry.
You do have other good stories. You just saved the cardiac arrest for when we're on the podcast.
No.
Anyway.
Just, most of the time, my patients don't die in my care. But I mean, a cardiac arrest, they're dead. Damn it.
Anyway.
We need to come up with a story episode where I promise I can come up with more stories. But point being, situation, I mean, the guy was literally 99 years old and had everything the fuck wrong with him. Like, he had every medical condition wrong with him. And when we get there, it was one of the shittiest nursing homes, actually, close to the town that we live in. So very,
that doesn't
very,
narrow it down because there's like 12 of them all around us. So
I mean, yes, but very, very, very local at this point. And I get there, the facility staff was only halfway doing CPR on the bed. So when I start CPR, first good compression, I mean, I break every single one of his ribs. I mean, he was literally a skeleton with skin on him. And we're like asking for his age and his medical history. And literally the more the staff is telling us, we're like, why is this man not a DNR? And they just like share this look. Because his was a witnessed arrest, and they, had quote-unquote been treating him for, the 5 minutes it took us to get there. So, I mean, it was an arrest we had to work. And I think he was in VFib. But literally the nursing staff, like, shared a look, and they're like, his son. And we were like, what does that mean? And they were like, he feigns, not wanting to let his dad go. And I'm like, okay, I get that. He hasn't worked through DABDA, the stages of grief and blah, 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 and acceptance. But we have also seen where family members will keep the elderly alive to take their, Social Security checks. And they're literally keeping them alive for money. And the son refused to allow this poor gentleman to not get a DNR. And so at that point, I mean, we worked him because we legally had to, but we worked him for the 25 minutes. I mean, he had COVID, the flu, and every other medical condition. And when we finally called him, it was almost a feeling of relief. Like, this poor, suffering, like, skeleton of a man who used to be a person can finally rest and be out of pain. So, I mean, we do have those moments, too, as awful as that sounds.
I would say to answer... The question is, how do you deal with emotional trauma of losing someone you're helping? And over the past 12 plus years that I've been doing this, of all the different people I've worked with, all the different calls I've run, I've never seen someone, A, make it long in this field, or B, just in general be healthy when they form personal connections with their patients.
No.
It just that whatever we want to say leading up to that is a hard, fast, fixed point. And I get it if you work where you grew up, which I don't, thankfully. I do have the luxury of I have only been here my adult life, so the pool of people that I know is very small that I could be working. So I understand that's harder for a lot of people.
Honestly, though, at that point, that's where it's more responsible to recuse yourself from that call. Work it, I guess, in theory, as long as you have to, but call for backup. Or if you recognize the address, go ahead and call for backup. Or don't work in the county you live in. We have a friend that literally refused to work in one of the counties that's close by to us because she currently lives and has raised her children in that area, so she went a county over. Like, I respect that.
Yeah.
But how to deal with the emotional trauma, really, unfortunately, the basic answer is going to be it depends on the person, on the situation. Yeah. But yes, don't develop those super personal connections with patients, because that will absolutely destroy somebody.
And if you will know when you need to take a break. You need to fight for those breaks, whether it's for you or for your partner. I had a partner at one point, and she was a little newer to the job anyway, but she dealt with a lot of just sensory overload stuff anyway. But there would be some bad calls that we would run, and she would just come at me and be like, hey, I need a minute. Like I just need to go walk off some steam, decompress a little bit. I will be right back. You're never going to get an argument from me for that, because I
No.
get that. And no, I don't have that kind of feeling for the most part. If I've had like three bad calls back to back, it's more of a, hey, I just want to sit down and do the paperwork. But
Well, and if you have a good supervisor or good service, they'll let you. I think we've mentioned previously after I ran that dead baby call, my supervisor told us go out of service with county, get you something to eat, come to headquarters, and if all you need is to finish that chart, like you don't need to talk or cry or anything, they were like, finish the chart, in, close the chart out and like call it a day. Just put it behind you, but we are here to talk, etc. And they, gave me all the resources and stuff if I needed it. But ultimately all I needed was, I just want to finish this chart and go home, because it was like the last call of shift, I think.
so now, switching gears, we've answered all of Cameron's questions. We had a question from a lady named Cheryl, who is in New York, and as far as we know, is not an EMS. She doesn't, have a lot on her profile. We're not personally friends with her, it's just a connection through the page. So, as far as we know, Cheryl, you're not an EMS, but if you are, let us know. The question that she had for us is, what are all of the advantages and disadvantages of working for EMS? I don't even know where to start on that.
Okay, so I would like to start with shifts.
Okay.
So for me, when I was younger, I did not like the idea of, a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Like, my parents did it, and like my father, who worked from home, even on the weekends, he was still on his fucking computer. And that's a whole backstory, but he was always on the computer. Like, he would quote unquote take vacation, but even when we were at the beach for a week, he would still be working most of the days, and it always made him angry. I mean, he would work late in the night. My mom would bring work home, so it was never truly 9 to 5. So I was like, I don't want a desk job. I want something that I can be moving and doing the things. So I was kind of drawn to the change in shifts. And I think literally for the first like month I was ever certified as an EMT, I was on 12s. I can't even remember if it was like some kind of rotation, like 3-2-2-3 or something, or if it was just kind of whatever. But I was on some kind of 12s, but very quickly I was moved to the 24-48 schedule. And I was like, oh my God, sure, I may get my ass kicked for 24 hours, but only working 2 days a week, like, hell yeah, life can't get better than that. So, like, I think to start, the change in shifts is good, but so that was an advantage for me in the beginning. Now, if we're being completely honest, I would consider it kind of a disadvantage.
Well, I think it depends on a couple of things. On the topic of schedule specifically, depends on where you work. Is it a busy service? Is it a slow service? It depends on the kind of rotation, and it also depends on what your certification is. When
Yeah.
I was an EMT, 24s was a bomb. Like, I loved it. But you know what? If we got woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning for a cardiac arrest, I was not in charge. I did not have to make all of the critical... I still had to be engaged, but the buck didn't stop with me.
Ha ha ha, you referenced a cardiac arrest.
Yes, yes. But, but now, what drove me to get my paramedic is I was tired of not being the one making the decisions. Not because I wanted the power, but because I found it was interesting. I thought it was cool. I still think pharmacology and cardiology are fucking cool. Like, it's just the coolest shit.
Oh, I love the
It's
medicine.
it's like the voodoo magic of EMS, that we just press buttons and push things and stuff happens, and I like it. But as I progressed certification, 24s became a different ball game.
And I didn't believe him that it would until I got my paramedic, and then I was like, well, fuck.
Yes. Now,
Again.
and now my current full-time schedule is 24/72s, which I do love. Of course, no, I don't like being woken up after midnight, and I'm a youngster, but I am getting older. I'm not as young as I once was,
He's
so
salty when he gets woken up.
I really am. Like, I'll be cool and calm and collected, but if I get some bullshit thrown at me, the filter is turned off after midnight. So whatever comes out of my mouth, no promises on it. But anyway, so from a scheduling standpoint, EMS is interesting. It's very interesting because it runs 24/7. you usually have a lot of flexibility, and you can gain some consistency in your schedule depending on where you work and the patterns and so forth, and what your life is like at home.
Yeah, and there are going to be times in life where you change that. I mean, Daniel and I have majorly changed our full-time job hours, I think twice in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
for varying reasons.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is a level of flexibility to that. But moving on from like scheduling, I guess I would say environment.
There's a certain, I don't know if I'd say call it a coolness factor, but like there's so much practical life knowledge that you get from, not so much from working in EMS. I mean, yes, but just the educational process. Like even just going through EMT, you gain a knowledge base that is significantly above the average Joe on the street. And especially once you get paramedic, no, you're not a physician, you're not a PA, you're not on that level, but you gain a number of tangible and intangible skills along the way that are incredibly useful and translate into a lot of other areas of life. I mean, you think about the things that, we see people get worked up over, things that we see people panic about or stress about, or things that wreck other people's days, and we're just kind of like, we're good. Or, oh, someone just fell over and started seizing, or they fell and sliced their arm on a table and they have arterial bleeding. We're cool with that. This is what we do. So I mean that's kind of an advantage, I would say, that. And I think, we've talked some about whether or not to, what the kids, if the kids ever want to pursue EMS or whatever. I think all kids should get put through EMT school. I think that should be like a high school curriculum for everybody.
Well, and it's starting to spread. We do have high school cohorts going through some
Yeah.
programs.
I think that's another advantage to it, I'd say.
I think, again, I would say environment is an advantage and a disadvantage.
How do you mean by that?
Well, so an advantage, and I guess it depends on how you look at it. So, like, an advantage for me, like, I'm not stuck in an ER with 4 rooms. Or
6 or 8, depending on staffing.
I mean, yes, I was being hopeful, but and I guess it depends on the criticality of a patient. Another advantage, we can only have a certain max number of patients, because I mean, if we have too many patients on like a really bad MVA, we're calling for additional resources to come take patients. Ideally, especially if they're critical patients, you shouldn't have more than like 1, maybe 2, depending on situation, and we have them for a relatively short period of time. I mean, yeah, CC calls can run longer, especially if it's long distance,
Yeah.
but it's still normally going to be shorter than if the patient's getting admission, or if you're in admit or something like that. So you have them for a shorter period of time. What I enjoy is seeing their entire environment, and it's almost like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Like, it works my brain. It's something I have to figure out. Now, obviously, a disadvantage is people as a whole are more disgusting than you think, and the obviously safety factor.
I would say another advantage of it is too, it makes you comfortable in very weird, uncomfortable settings. When you are in a situation where you're working like a bad trauma, where someone's bleeding out and yelling and flailing around, and you can still try to carry a conversation with them, or carry on a conversation with your fellow providers, and still be able to laugh, not make fun of the patient, but just to be able to laugh and have a lighthearted air in the room. Well,
just a quick comment. My favorite thing to tell patients, like if we have to cut their clothes off or move them or whatever, is, I promise I'm going to keep you covered. No free shows today.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously not to children, but like, adults.
Right. Yeah.
But to adults, like, that get the joke. Like, I don't think someone has never not laughed at that.
Well, and we see, I'd say a disadvantage for guys is you see a lot of boobs. Like a lot of boobs. You're doing 12 leads and stuff all the time, and you see that hygiene is not a priority for a lot of people. You're gonna see just a lot of stuff that's like, okay, that's but you also kind of become used to it. Like, you got to put a 12 lead on 80-year-old grandma, and I had one lady who was, I think she was like in her mid 90s, and I had to put a 12 lead on her, and yeah. So I was having, I was doing the backhanded scoop and all that stuff. I was being polite and respectful, and I was like, "I'm sorry, honey. Just gotta put these stickers on." And she just goes, "You just wanted to play with my titties, didn't you?" The
The
look of
older,
horror on my face was because she said it so seriously,
hmm
and I was like, "Oh no!" And she's like, "Honey, I'm just teasing. It's fine."
grandmas have the best. I mean, grandpas do too, but especially like on the topic of 12 leads and everything, are so funny. I mean, I had a little old Graham hit on me a couple days ago when we did the hospital clinicals. That was a weird day.
But even just to be able to say, like, I mean, if I sat down and thought about it, like, I have probably placed, not probably, I have placed literally hundreds, if not thousands, of 12 leads.
That's one of those things,
And
probably thousands, and if you
yeah,
include all the patient contacts we did for school and
oh
everything,
yeah. And
easily.
so just to be able to say, like, yeah, I've literally, like, handled thousands of strangers' boobs.
Oh
Like,
no!
when you put it that way, it's a little weird.
I
It's a
mean,
little
I mean,
strange.
okay, if you put it that way, just situationally and everything, I've seen a whole lot of penis too.
Well,
Like
but
if you,
okay, but that's the thing is
that's
we just
weird.
it doesn't phase us anymore.
Yeah, but at the same time, having this conversation, why'd you have to word it like that?
But
Now I'm like sitting here flushed and feeling awkward.
I mean, I remember the first time I saw. Well, okay, when I was a kid, we would go to a gym, and there was locker rooms, and there was old men there at 5 o'clock in the morning. So no, it wasn't my first time seeing things, but the first time as an adult seeing a man stripped naked who was in a car wreck or whatever, and it's like, well, okay, there's one of those. That was just a little strange, but now it's like, okay, cool, we gotta get you naked, bro. Here we go.
My favorite thing, I know this is slightly off topic, but my favorite thing is seeing.
Incredibly off color as well.
I'm sorry. My favorite thing is seeing students experiencing. I mean, not just
All of those things.
boobies and penises for the first time, but just as a whole, seeing things for a first time, and like the realization of, oh my God, this is real. So,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would consider those kind of advantages.
Yeah, and then yeah. It's just, in all of the bodily fluids that you get exposed to. Like, okay, as a serious note, disadvantages of this job, you are exposed to
Everything.
so many bloodborne pathogens, airborne pathogens. You're regularly getting fecal matter on you, and blood and urine and all of the things. Not to mention the body odor. Like, is it weird that the body odor is the thing I sometimes worry about the most? Like, when you gotta lift somebody and put your arms under their armpits,
And then you smell like it for the rest
yeah,
of the
no,
day.
I just,
Yeah.
but
Or going into patients' houses and like the smell sticking to your hair. So like I
yeah,
would say hygiene and smell is kind of at a disadvantage. Like they advise that you bring one extra, if not more, uniforms to work, which I chronically
yes,
suck at. Daniel has had to bring me uniforms on more than one occasion
yeah.
for getting covered in blood.
I am a fucking ninja when it comes to avoiding blood. Like, I will
I
get the fuck out of the way for some blood.
Man, I am not. It's
You can't
literally.
even keep coffee off of you in the morning, much less
Listen,
patients'
listen,
blood.
listen.
This is not a listen, Linda moment.
It is a listen, Linda moment.
Anyway, we're sidestepping a little bit.
I would like to throw in one more like major disadvantage, which anybody in EMS is going to be able to agree with is I'm sorry, pay. I mean,
Well, yeah.
pay as a whole. Like yes, there are certain areas and certain services that are going to pay more than others. Obviously cost of living and everything, but chronically as a whole, what we have to deal with, what we can do, which a lot of the general public don't know the extent of our scope. We're not paid anything.
Now I wouldn't even say a counter to that. Just the other side of that coin is you will always have a job. As long as
Oh,
you are,
100%.
as long as you are physically capable of doing it, which is going to get into some of our remaining questions, as long as you are physically and mentally capable of continuing the job, you will always have a job.
Which one more last disadvantage. This job is so hard on the body, your sleep cycle, and I mean ultimately your mentality, which can in turn cause stress to your home life, family, friends. A lot of us in public service, our only friends are in public service. Or, our non-public service friends are few and far between. And usually like my childhood best friend, she's in social work and she's had a couple different social work jobs, so she has like a level of understanding. So like I don't even know if you could count her out as Like, she's
Yeah.
not in public service, but she still knows more, like, intimately, I guess you could say.
I would say that the ability to socialize in this job comes in waves. I think it's hardest your first, I'd say, 8 years.
Really? Because I think the dark humor gets a lot of people that don't have dark humor.
Well, but as far as like, for the majority of my career, I pretty much spent my time around work people, and maybe part of that was a function of when I got divorced, because there was the consummate also, change in my religious status as well that occurred at the same time. So my social circle went from extensive family connections, church connections, and work to it was just work. And so, I mean, I kind of went head first into that. So I'm maybe not a great model, but I've kind of feel like over the past few years, it's a lot easier for me to socialize with people outside of EMS because I don't want to talk about EMS with them. I want to talk about their lives and other things.
Think about it too, though. It depends on a healthy work-life balance. Exactly what you were
Yes,
just saying.
fair.
Our family work-life balance has significantly changed in the last 2 years, and we're making more of an effort to socialize and do things non-EMS related.
Agreed. I mean, I had even started that before though. Like I couldn't even put a pinpoint on the time. It was kind of more post COVID.
You didn't socialize during COVID?
As much as I fucking could, I did. But anyway, it's one of those things that you will, because when at first you're excited about it, you want to talk about every single thing about it because it's so damn cool, and it is fucking cool. But it can drive people away a little bit sometimes.
It can. I will say, if you get me on a tangent, I really do like talking about calls, but not as a one-upping.
Especially cardiac arrests.
Shut up. I have run some really good rare condition calls. We just need to have an episode where I share call stories because like I've run some rare shit. But it's not even about, it's never about one-upping, but it's not even about like, oh, EMS. I just love the medicine.
Yeah.
Like cold sepsis causing Bell's palsy symptoms, or well, stroke-like symptoms is actually Bell's palsy. Like that just blew my fucking mind when I ran that call.
Yeah.
Like just having the environment of continuously learning and finding out what the body can do. So I guess in that would be an advantage for me. Mm-hmm. The excitement of continuing medicine and learning new things on the daily. My education didn't stop when I graduated paramedic school.
Yeah. Fair.
Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah, so this next one, and I'll go, I know we kind of tried alternating, but I know this person. So this is from Jerry in Simpsonville. I actually met Jerry long time ago when she first came down here from, I believe it was New Jersey. She had a full career up there and moved to South Carolina and has since, gotten off the truck. And that has kind of prompted her question here, which is, I would like discussions and possible ideas for solutions for when your body gets broken, you're aging, and can't do all the lifting and moving, but you still have the knowledge and skills of the profession and want to work. Where do we go from here? I know of some ideas, but perhaps there's more to consider.
So I did, but both Daniel and I have examples of like people that we know and all the rest of it, but I also did some additional research. Now the statistics that, and I promise you this is not going to be heavy and boring, just any percentages that I mention, these are projected growths between 2020 and 2030, so within like this decade that we're currently in. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the biggest part of answering this question is it depends. And I know all my students hate it when I say that, but it really does depend on if it's solely aging, what kind of like body being broken. Also, it depends on how much time, effort, money, etc. you want to put into, because just like paramedic, I mean, you can have the degree, but like a paramedic, there's only a few jobs that you can like laterally slide into. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be within your full scope. Now, an emergency room technician, depending on the area that you live, you may just be a normal tech that like an EMT or an MA can apply for, and the closest thing to an IV you can do is a straight stick. But there are certain ERs that are employing paramedics to be paralleled with nursing staff, and they are allowed to function as full-fledged paramedics in the ER setting. You're literally given a few, set number of rooms, and like if two critical patients come in and a doc is on one, you will literally run the other one. You will make treatment decisions based on standing orders and protocols, just like you would on the truck. You're just in the ER setting. So it's going to depend on your hospital. Now, the ER tech growth is expected to be to 11%. Some of these, let's see, a couple of them, I think the biomed tech, which is where you're like, or the medical equipment repair, that certification can be done in like 2 months. But again, it depends on what you want to apply and the extent of it. That growth is expected to grow 7%. Now, if you want to go further into education, you could do PA school. I mean, paramedic to PA, depending on how much education you have, that is actually going to be the highest growth of all the statistics I found at 30%. You can be a surgical technologist, a health information technician, which is actually a desk job, work from home most of the time. You can go CC in flight, depending on who your employer is. That could be a lot, lower impact, but you still get to utilize it. Offshore medic for like oil rigs and industrial medic. Yeah, you're going to have to work when you have to work, but ideally the call volume is going to be lower. I mean, some of the large local industrial plants around here. Oh, let's take Amazon, for example. Amazon pays relatively well from what I hear.
Really well.
Yeah, really well from what I hear. Granted, when you're the new person, it's not the best shift in the world, but once you're there for 6 months, you get to slide into a shift. And I mean, it's a cush job. I mean, it's a good job, and they function 24/7 because they employ 24/7. You can even go take a class to go be a coroner. You can get into forensics. There's actually a parallel to be a vet tech. Medical billing and coding, you can actually do that kind of schooling online. I have a cousin that's an RN that does, it's not quite medical billing and coding, but she does some kind of work from home job that she makes bukus of money, and she loves it, and she's still a nurse. I mean, telehealth has expedited that greatly.
Well, and there's also options too, like freestanding ERs and urgent cares. There's some that love having paramedics to come, and some that will actually let them function at their scope of practice. Mm-hmm. Another very common one, at least around here, and I know Jerry has done this. I don't know if she still does or not, but working at plasma centers.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, the physical stress is non-existent, other than just you're on your feet. But you're not lifting, moving, shoving, like, it's very low impact. You start an IV on somebody, then they sit there for an hour.
Honestly, though, if standing was an issue, especially with, like, the Disability Act? I can't remember the whole name of it.
ADA, Americans Disabilities Act.
Yeah. It could be one of those things that they have a chair that you can, like, roll around with you in order to do that. Because, like, there are variations. Actually, two of our friends are paramedics and decided that it was time for them to get off the truck, and they're now actually hired under a neurosurgeon's outpatient clinic, literally running the clinic, like they're office managers. So yeah, it's kind of the boring office manager stuff, but if an emergency happens, they have full scope of practice to run whatever call until EMS gets there. Yes, in general, with fewer meds than like maybe a full-fledged truck was, but they can still function under that doctor's care if he's, with a patient or off-site or whatever.
Well, you can also get a little creative. Like there's these IV bar companies that you can go in and you can just get a fluid infusion. You're not sick. It's just, it could be, for people who are super athletic, they want, some recovery infusions, or people are hungover, they want to, I mean, there's a number of different applications like that, or cruise ship medics.
I was about to say
cruise ship medics are, and now and again, I know we're throwing out a lot of these, and it does depend on what are your physical limitations, because there are some of these that do still require you to be on your feet doing stuff, active. But there's also plenty that, hey, you can really, there's a lot of like safety officer positions in places where yes, you're still responsible for, medical training, for first responding to crises, all of that.
Well, and me personally, I have to throw out if it's truly like you want to be actively applying this, so many places, and I have good and negative feelings about this, but so many places are starting up their own in house education and stuff like that. I cannot harp enough about we need not necessarily more academies, but we need good quality ones. Start getting your instructor certifications and
Hmm.
go teach. Even if it's only the pocket card classes, or if you get like your paramedic modular, but you don't want to get your full fledged paramedic instructor, all the rest of it, you can go, teach certain units or, certain sections. If you don't like lecturing, go adjunct somewhere. But be putting good back into the field of those who are starting.
Or, and this is something that I really want us to talk more in depth, and we are going to put out more content on, is paramedics are perfect for getting into the entrepreneurial space. And if you're okay with stepping out and doing some different things, you'd be amazed at how your experience can actually be incredibly useful. Case in point, I'm working on a software company right now, and I've been working on it for 2 years. And we're pretty well close to a release coming up here in the next 2-3 months, I'd say. But it's all software built specifically for EMS. And no, I don't program. I don't. I'm so absolutely stupid when it comes to anything beyond your basic user experience of a computer. But I said, hey, I see a need out here from based in my experience on the truck. I see a need that needs to be filled. How can I do something to make that happen? And I started creating a group of people around me that had the skill sets I needed. And no, they are not medical people, but we are able to work to synergize together, and some pretty cool stuff is coming. But my point is, there's a lot of applications of our knowledge and experience base that if you're willing to shift your mindset a little bit about how you think about your experience and what you think your options are, you can actually do a lot and at any point in your life and do very, very, very well.
So talking about that actually, not to like totally backstep, but speaking of the advantages and disadvantages, that kind of brings up, yes, our knowledge does give us advantages. And honestly, on the entrepreneurial side, like we can see gaps in the field where there's a need that maybe we have better insight to be able to pair up with somebody who maybe has some different know-how to make, said idea for gap and need able. Like it's an like our knowledge base is an advantage to help us like
Hmm.
with entrepreneurial stuff and
Yeah.
finding and making things.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you.
Well, and you eventually, and part of it depends on where you are in life and what kind of life you want. I mean, I would assume that if you're physically restricted from doing the job, you want to find something that is not stressful and it still gives you the income to live the life you want. And like for me, I'm okay making that transition. I want to make that transition. And the more and more I talk to people, there's a lot of people who are in my shoes. It's not that they hate EMS. They're just so burned out and so tired, and they want something different just for their own well being and for their families and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that. We feel so restricted by, well, I'm a paramedic. So I just the epitome job is for me to work on a truck. Absolutely not. You got to take care of your family. You got to take care of yourself. If you are getting to the point where there's nothing that's helping you with managing your emotions and your stresses and traumas or whatnot with this job, or if it's negatively impacting your family, find other things to do. You can be satisfied in so many things once you establish what your true priorities are in life.
Which kind of reminds me of another disadvantage. I apologize. I'm jumping back a little bit. I think a disadvantage is, and what we're trying to bridge on with the whole entrepreneurial stuff, is a lot of the world outside of public service doesn't know what we do. Even hospital staff, some of them do, especially if they came from EMS, but there's a ton that don't. A lot of the general public don't know. And although we're in public service, there, for whatever reason, I don't know where it started, but there's a lot of infighting and dick measuring between fire, EMS, and law enforcement that is also going to add to the disadvantage and the dissonance amongst everybody, which probably plays into why the general public, we don't do more with the general public. So we're hoping with this project to kind of help with that as well. So I think that kind of wraps up, and we might possibly think of something and circle back to this like I have with the advantages and disadvantages. But our next question is from Casey. She is, or was, can't quite tell, and we're not stalkers, but EMS related. She is from Litchfield, Illinois, and she has asked 2 questions. The first question, she was wanting to discuss things with how do you work with an autoimmune disease, and she kind of listed POTS, lupus, Gillian Barre syndrome, and Bell's palsy just as a few. We also see rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's or IBS, and thyroid issues. I have gone down multiple rabbit holes looking at all these conditions. Like, yes, I know in general what the conditions are, but like even treatment processes and stuff like that I've looked into. And for some of them, again, it depends. It's going to depend on the severity and what your like actual affliction from it is. Because unfortunately, it's going to come down to you might need to simply make some healthy diet and exercise changes and avoid triggers. Or like with the Guillain-Barré or even the Bell's palsy, if it's at its most significant point, like it's at the severity. I'm losing words.
Peak severity.
Peak severity. There we go. I don't know why I couldn't find that. The peak severity, it would actually, in theory, be dangerous for somebody to continue working on a truck, at least temporarily. And most of these, or those 2, are supposed to resolve after a while. So in theory, with rehab or whatever, you can get back on the truck. But like with POTS, a huge one that I read is you need to work on changing positions slowly and take your medications, a healthy diet, and exercise. Unfortunately, with lupus and some of the other ones that are progressive diseases, you have to make little changes here and there based on what your body needs. There's not going to be one straightforward answer that we can give. Like, does that make sense?
Well, and part of it's going to depend too on, do you already work in the field and are having these new onset? Because a lot of times when that happens, I've personally seen a lot of employers will make extensive accommodations.
Yes, that's a very good point.
One particular place that I've worked, they're very, very, very good at saying, okay, this individual, they're no longer able to function in their primary role, but they have other skills that are useful and applicable that we can, I've seen them create positions for them, specifically, just literally out of thin air. And what I hate is seeing how that would stir up so much jealousy and bitterness, and some people who otherwise had no problem with that person would suddenly be like, oh, I think it's just stupid that they get that. No, what? Fuck off. Like, I've seen it happen multiple times, and just fuck all the way off. That person is dealing with their own shit and trying to put food on their table. It's not your fucking business why they do what they do. And, okay, is all decision-making fair, or at least is it perceived as fair in how management does things sometimes, depending on different employers? No, not always. But there should be a little bit of grace and realize, hey, you know what? That person's dealing with some shit that you would not want to deal with.
And if you had to deal with it, you would hope that the company cared about you.
Hell yeah.
To do it.
Hell yeah. So suck it up and deal with it, because that's just immature and stupid. We don't need to be dealing with that. But Like Michelle said, you need to be consistent with whatever the treatment plan is that you have. Some things are just progressive. You can't stop it. You might be able to slow it down a little bit, but you need to have a realistic awareness of how well you can safely do your job. Because, and I understand wanting to work and work and work as much as you can, not wanting to draw disability, like, I get it. But you also have to consider your safety, the safety of your patients, and the safety of your partners. And if you get to a point where whatever your illness is going to jeopardize that or potentially jeopardize that, you need to figure out a way to step away from it and figure out some other accommodations. That's a process. There's not a cut and dry answer to that. But it comes down to you need to take responsibility for yourself, take some ownership, take some leadership in your life, and you need to figure out where those lines are for each of those things. And if you have all of them, oh, I'm sorry. That's a little rough. But
Well, and I want to throw out there, it's not just about taking like prescription meds. And I mean, yes, EMS as a whole needs to learn how to eat better and exercise more and everything else. Some people do it great, some people do nothing, and then there's those of us that might fall in the middle. But as a whole, there are certain, I guess you would say homeopathic. There's kind of a negative connotation to homeopathic, but there really are, certain foods and herbs and teas and all the rest of it that can treat a wide range of things that, obviously talk to your doctor. I'm not suggesting you go out and, pull the weeds from the yard and start taking them. Like,
yeah, we're talking about legal options, things that are legal and healthy.
well, I'm talking about literally the weeds growing in the front yard.
No. But I was just saying, people are like, oh, well, natural stuff. That means I can do wheat. And no, don't be an idiot. Like,
Well, it depends. Well, it depends on what state.
it does.
I mean, it depends on what state.
And yeah.
Because I mean, ketamine now has so many applications outside of like
No,
emergency
absolutely.
medicine. Ketamine drips for mental health, like long-term mental health
No, I agree.
disorders. Actually, I'm a huge proponent. Like, you should go, if you haven't heard of this, you need to go research ketamine infusions for treatment on honestly a whole lot of stuff. Like the paramedics, you can go work at ketamine clinics.
Yep, true.
Doing
Actually, the
stuff.
ketamine clinic in Greenville, one of the guys
There's
was,
3 now.
well, so at least the first one I was ever aware of, I'm pretty sure it was the first one in Greenville, was like co-started by a critical care paramedic. Like,
That makes me so happy.
like there's options out there if you want it. Anyway, continuing with what we were saying.
But yeah, so I mean, I guess you would say homeopathic, but like there are other things. So like it's going to give you some rank ass breath, but raw garlic actually has so many health benefits to it. Now, no, I'm not saying, chew on it, but, chop it up and put it in your food. Anyways, so I mean, goodness, go look up raw garlic. There are so many things that you can do that's going to help you feel better. In a good bit of it for the physical and the mental health. Please, if you haven't done so already, refer back to our personal wellness podcast, because we do talk a good bit about this stuff, and I'm sure we will talk about more later on.
So I mean, the short answer to the diseases question is, like you said, it depends. So you have to work with your caregivers and actually work with them and actually do the things, because I know people who have some of these and other pathologies, and like Crohn's disease is one that I know a number of people that have it, and they don't follow their physician's directions, and they get sick, and they get sick on shift, and the burden falls on other people, and then they expect to be accommodated, but they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's one niche of this that I do have a problem with. If you have a chronic disease and you are not doing the bare minimum that you can do at home on your own time, in your own way, period, then no one is obligated to help you if you're not helping yourself.
I agree, because ideally you would work for a service that if an emergency, or a flare-up or something happens, you have good coworkers and good management that are going to help you and, figure out the things, don't worry about, your call-out number, what the fuck ever. But yes, if you're like abusing the system and not following it, and the cheese pisses off your belly and you eat a fuck ton of it anyways and then get sick, it's like, there comes a point where you're not going to be spoon fed and get all the special treatment. Now, I will say, and this is just a fun little fact that I have actually found a lot of people don't know.
I didn't know it. In 12 years, I never heard this shit.
So, over the counter Imodium, which is used for diarrhea, which is a very common thing in people with Crohn's, but also for those of you that run, overdose type symptoms in like the elderly population. Imodium actually has a high affinity and will attach to opioid receptors. So it is literally possible to overdose on Imodium and it's going to mimic an opioid overdose, and Narcan will reverse those side effects. So, like, for example, if you're now I'm not calling anybody out, but like your coworker is acting high, they're acting really weird, all these drug tests have come clean, blah, 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 might be a fuck ton of Imodium. Now, no, there's no way to test it, but just fun fact. So please, if you take Imodium, be careful because it can cause bad side effects you don't want. But like, just as a little know-how for calls, if you get called out to an elderly patient that on the med list doesn't have any narcs, but you see on the med list Imodium, consider it still might be opioid related.
And that some people might not be lying to you when they said that they didn't take anything. Because they're, and okay, obviously, be aware of your scene and do a proper patient assessment, because the fresh track marks are a pretty clear indication that Imodium was not the key problem.
No.
But they're just, and like you said, especially in nursing homes, for these patients that don't have control over their medication intake. That's a very strong possibility. If you're seeing these symptoms and, staff is like, no, they're not on any opiates, might still be something else going on.
Might be Imodium.
Yeah.
You didn't know that your shits might get you.
That's your nugget for the day, is the Imodium OD. And then kind of a quick switch from that, also from Casey in Illinois. Her second question.
And this is our last question.
Yes,
that we chose for today.
Whew, this is the last one, but God, this is oof. So the last question she has is why. She wants us to talk about why EMTs and paramedics don't take their own mental health seriously.
I think that's a very loaded question. Now, I will say, and I'm sorry I'm saying it again, I do want to refer back to some of it to our personal wellness episode, but I mean, we are going to talk about it here. Daniel brought up, and we've actually seen it some on social media, kind of the good old boy system kind of rearing its ugly head.
Well, so there's kind of a general understanding of what the quote good old boy system is, and I realize that term is maybe just a local thing, or more local than not. But we always think of it in terms of management, or just, the in crowd at services and whatnot. And I really feel that at its core, the good old boy system is about keeping things the way they are. So we usually think of good old boy system as, oh, well, these number of people right here are protected. Well, yes and no. The reason people are protected in the good old boy system is not because there's no way they can ever become a scapegoat. But they're protected because they keep things the way they are. They don't rock the boat. They don't challenge the status quo. And therefore, they're protected at all costs because they're going to keep the power where it is and keep the abuse where it is. Now, sometimes some of this can be done inadvertently or non-maliciously. But as a rule, that really is how I would define what the good old boy system is it's trying to keep things from changing. And unfortunately, so much of that is true. So much of that is true of the people that aren't in leadership positions. There's a lot of people that they don't want to talk about getting better mental health because they like wallowing and having an excuse for bad behavior, bad coping mechanisms, alcoholism, the whole nine yards. They want to hold on to those things. It's a crutch. It's a narrative that they have told themselves, and they don't want that challenge, because if it's challenged, then they don't have a leg to stand on. They actually have to take responsibility to fix it. And no, I'm not saying that that's every paramedic that doesn't take their mental health seriously. There's a wide variety of reasons. That's just one that we've encountered a lot more recently as we're putting out more strong content. there's a lot of positive response, but there's also been some pushback from people that don't like this conversation. They don't like talking about it. It hits a nerve with them.
Well, and a lot of what we've seen is, oh, grow thicker skin, or oh, you're snowflakes, or oh, this is how it always was. And I think that kind of goes back to, abused people will either heal and pass on better or will continue abusing. And now, no, I'm not, saying that, we're literally beating each other or this or that. But like the idea of one of our posts that we put, good intention, like lighthearted pranks and teasing. I mean, that's a culture that's fine and just human nature. We all tease our friends. But like the true
Well, I'll say I've always been a lead prankster, at least at previous places. Like I was the motherfucker that would always fuck with people's drugs.
well,
That's
and
funny and fine.
well, that's funny and fine, but I'm talking about like the true like hate and hazing and
Yeah.
making stress worse. I mean, we've been told some really horrific stories, like hazing stories and everything, and that's just not okay. And like this whole idea of, oh, well, I was given bad mental health because I experienced this, and I had this bad call, and I was told to suck it up, Buttercup. So you need to grow thicker skin. Like that's not okay. Now, yes, you're gonna have some people that want to use it again as a crutch. As, oh, well, I'm the way I am because of blah blah blah, and you just have to accept it. That's not okay either. I
Well,
mean, it's not.
yeah, and I think sometimes we get used to the coping mechanisms and we kind of like them. We like being able to, after every shift, come home and drink a case of beer and veg out on Netflix and then just crash and go to bed. Or the just so many different things. So I think there's an aspect of that plays into this. And again, I'm not saying that it's even conscious for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I just think it's a natural mentality for humans to want to find something that they're comfortable in. And we're very good at adapting to stress, to traumas, and all of that, and normalizing those things. And when we normalize them for so long, it becomes part of our identity. And when that identity is challenged, we get defensive, we get frustrated, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to go to therapy because we're going to have to confront the fact that there's other things in our life we're not dealing with.
It's also having the like alpha masculine persona that, again, like you're saying, you don't want challenged. By admitting that you have a problem or a call got to you or something is challenging your strength or your ability to do that job, when in fact it's not. I mean, everybody wants to talk about, or I'm sorry, not public service, military suicide rates. What is it, 22 a day? I can't remember the number.
I think it was 22 a day.
22 a day for military. And like, yes, that needs to be acknowledged. I'm not hating on that one at all. Like, absolutely not. That needs to be acknowledged. But like, we don't really have a number. I mean, we've put out the statistic in previous episodes, but like as a whole, that's not as much talked about. But what I found on my mental health journey is there's also a lot of resources that people don't necessarily know about. And going to just a regular non-trauma therapist is probably not the best answer. You need to have a trauma specific, like trauma trained specialist to go to, because there are different ways to think about it. There are so many mental health, more and more research is coming out. It is such a complex thing. You may think that your mental health isn't that bad, but when you actually sit down and talk about like habits and how you, unfortunately, you're gonna have to talk about how you feel, and everything, it actually tracks back to a lot more, and you may actually find that you have these triggers and bad habits that you don't know about. So some of it too is people just don't know. Oh, I'm a grumpy fuck all the time, and that's just me. It might not just be. It may be something that has been developing over time because of long-term chronic stress. It may not even be one call, and they just don't know. There's so many aspects to this.
I would say the most vocalized reason that I've heard over the years of why more of us don't go to therapy is well, they don't understand what I go through. They don't understand what we go through.
Yeah.
And I get that. And I to a degree there's truth to that. in the sense that, no, that specific therapist may not be able to enter into the exact experiences that you've had, but that can also be a huge benefit because they are not calloused towards it. So, like we talked about, I was pretty, I guess you could say, harsh, the first blush of this answer of the people that want to hold on to their crutches. But there's a lot of people that genuinely want the help. That they legitimately are genuinely wanting some help with their trauma and how to process these things. And maybe it's not even just all the time stuff. It's just, there's certain sentinel events that really push them over the edge. And they feel like they can't talk to anybody about this. And that's where the toxic sit down and shut up culture makes that even worse, because they feel like they can't even talk to the people that can relate to them, that can share those experiences. They can't fucking talk to them because they get fucking shamed over it and told to just suck it up and move on. Now, does there come a point where if you can't manage it, you need to get out of the field? Absolutely. Absolutely, because that can be part of taking care of your mental health. But when there's a huge threshold up to that point. And I think we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot as a culture where we don't encourage people to talk about things in a healthy way. It's either, oh, let me just unleash all my feelings on Facebook and get all the comments from everybody, and then nothing actually really changes. You just got validated publicly and that's it. Or it's, I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. I'm not going to go sit down and talk to a therapist. I'm not going to go all this and that. I guarantee you, I promise you motherfuckers. And I'm saying this as someone who resisted going to therapy for a lot of years. And for me, it's not even because of anything job related. It's just, other stuff. But,
I think everybody should be seeing a therapist, even if it's only
well,
once every couple months, just as maintenance. Everybody has something they need to talk about.
right. But I can promise you that therapist has seen a hell of a lot worse than you. Or at least they're very likely to. Because think about all of the trauma that we have seen and the things that we can detach from to a degree. All of those people that went through that actually live with that trauma. They actually experienced that shit. That motherfucker who had his legs blown off in a wreck has to go through recovery, has to go to all different kinds of therapy, all the post-surgery stuff. They live with that trauma every day that we were just witnesses to.
Now, don't get me wrong, we're not trauma comparing.
No. I'm the reason I'm saying that is to say those people more than likely had to go see a therapist.
Or if they don't, they need to.
Right. But chances are, statistically, there's enough of those people that have gone to therapists that there's a pretty good distribution of therapists that have been exposed to that stuff. Mm-hmm. So bear that in mind too, that the people that actually live the traumas that you just witnessed, they're the ones getting help from therapists. Mm-hmm. So no, you'd actually be surprised how much those therapists can relate to what we do. And maybe you don't like what they have to say. And maybe that's another reason why you don't want to listen to them.
Well, so this conversation actually kind of reminds me of two different things. Well, one, I have always been open about, my mental health journey and, all the things and whatever. And there was a paramedic that, and this is at a service in my career, that I had worked with plenty of times. We had a friendly relationship. I knew things about her life, she knew things about mine, but it wasn't like super deep, we're gonna trauma share and all the rest of it. And like there was a time that I didn't see her for a little while, and then all of a sudden we got to work together again. And I mean, I was excited. It had been a good day. She'd been a little distant for a while, and my overthinking ass was like, oh fuck, I did something. But, I just simply asked her, hey, how have you been? And I don't know what about my energy or situation. I mean, she knew a little bit because, I've, referenced various things, just in general conversation. So I don't know what it was about my energy, but she decided to open up and tell me, that she'd been struggling with mental health. And I'm not going to share any of those details, but just in general, we talked. And she said that one of her really good friends had encouraged her to get with a trauma therapist. And my, paramedic friend just expressed that she's not exactly sure what her trauma would be, because she's kind of like most of us. There's no like one call that gets her. She can completely detach from the bad calls and all the things. And so it turned into a very general conversation where I shared with her, just vague experiences with non trauma certified counselors and then trauma counselors. And, I told her kind of my experiences and, various aspects of my mental health. And she told me at the end of the conversation, she's like, I needed this. She's
Mm-hmm.
like, I was gonna go, but I wasn't sure what to expect. And you have made me feel more comfortable that like this is the route I need to take. Now, no, I wasn't like pressuring her to go, but I just shared like, from my
Mm-hmm.
point of view and experience. And, I've talked to her a few times. I don't ask her anything about her sessions or anything, but just, I check in, how are you doing? And she said, obviously there's no major changes, but she's like, I think this will work. And sometimes it's just, we might be a little bit of afraid of the unknown, and being able to have these open communications about what it is and what some of these processes are. I talked to her a little bit about like the polyvagal theory that we talked about in the personal wellness episode. And us being able to have conversations with our coworkers, not as therapists, but as it's okay to go to therapy, is going to help change the culture and the
Mm-hmm.
openness. And now on the second topic that I thought about, Daniel talking about the, oh, well, they don't understand. Although, like he said, in some ways that's true, but we've actually been told in therapy that sometimes that like deep down personal empathy that you can feel for each other and saying, I know how you feel, and then like sharing your personal experience and like basically having therapy with your coworker is actually possibly detrimental to the situation. It's not always good to discuss things with somebody within the field. Now, obviously, short term, like me and my paramedic friend did, like
Mm-hmm.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, here's the comfort and kind of what you could expect, or, maybe ask these questions. But like having somebody separated from the situation is actually going to be better.
And as I'm sitting here thinking about this too, I think that our mental health in EMS is not even, because again, the question is asking why EMTs and paramedics don't take their own mental health seriously. And as I'm thinking about it, most of the people that I've known in this field who struggle with mental health, it has nothing to do with the job explicitly. Absolutely nothing to do with it. It's other aspects of their life. And I think what might be the case, and I can relate this to my own experience as well, is we get so good at disconnecting from the trauma and hurt and everything that we witness that we also translate that ability to disconnect from the things at home that are traumatic, the things from our childhood that are traumatic, the things from you name it. We get really good at acting, and this is one that stings a little bit for me because I'm very good at on a scene. You won't really know. Okay, I might let on to other responders what's going on in my head, but as a patient, you're probably actually not going to know what I'm really thinking of you or about the situation or whatever, because I know how to act in a way that's going to keep you calm and reassure you and be best for you in that moment, but it's not necessarily me authentically what I'm feeling right then.
Oh, 100%.
And again, in the work context, that's fine. But it's so easy to take that acting home, and you can fuck some shit up at home if you do that. And not airing my business, but been there, done that, fellas. You can hurt yourself so fucking bad. And so I think that's kind of another tangent of this. A reason why we don't take our mental health seriously has nothing to do with unresolved trauma and horror from the job, but us taking that ability to disconnect, to emotionally freeze ourselves off from people, and we take it home, we take it to our own shit, And I think that's a reason a lot of people feel trapped and they feel stuck. It's because they've created this cognitive dissonance as a defense mechanism, as a well-intended defense mechanism, but it will cause some carnage at home. And maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not a year from now, but it will eventually break shit off.
Well, and on that tangent, if you take within the question, if you literally take the word seriously, it's kind of like with like drug addicts or alcoholics. Like, you can acknowledge that you have a problem. Like, oh yeah, my mental health's not the greatest it is, but it might be you don't take it, like, I guess at its face value is the word I'm going for. Like, you may think it's less severe than it actually is, which is where you need to take like personal inventory and have, an honest look in the mirror, and maybe even with a counselor to acknowledge it. An alcoholic may be like, oh yeah, of course I drink every day, but it's not that bad, when in reality they're drinking like 10 a day.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So they may acknowledge that they have, mental health problems, but, oh, it's not as bad. It's not actually reaching into every single part of my life. Like the little finger tendrils of mental health isn't everywhere.
And that's a topic we could go on and on.
Well,
I mean, we've already had a mental health episode, and we could really have more.
Well, September's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah.
Which, so, I mean, we are going to be hitting a lot more of this. So I think the gist of the question we've kind of, I don't want to say beat to death, but I mean, we've hit pretty hard, kind of generally. But there is more to come, because mental health is a problem. But I will say, we have enjoyed getting your questions. Please continue sending them. We're picking just a few at a time, because as you've seen, we can talk forever about some of this stuff.
Is there anything else we need to cover with any of these? I think we've pretty well gotten through everybody.
Yeah, no, that's all the questions that we picked for this episode.
Okay. Well, obviously, we love to continually hear from you guys, and our goal is to be able to answer everybody. Eventually, we will get to a point where we can't, but we do want to try and in some way, whether it's on a podcast or you can message us, you can comment on our posts, whatever you want. We both watch the page, we both will comment and interact with people. Like, don't be afraid to, whether you're in the field or not, if you're a student, if you're a seasoned provider, whatever, we would love to talk. Because the whole thrust of this movement is building connections and relationships with people in a healthy way. And that's how we're going to see change in this field, is we're building the connections, we're talking, we're addressing things, we're starting to uncover things we didn't even think about. Hell, there's some stuff in this conversation that, we hadn't thought about or really hadn't delved into. Like,
well, in different viewpoints. I mean, right before we started this, like, release of the project, we sent out the questionnaires, which are actually on the Facebook EMS 2.0 page. Honestly, those questionnaires are still up. Please fill them out if you have, 2 minutes, because we love the different viewpoints.
And ultimately, again, this is just leading us down the path that we want to go of bringing about real, lasting change and real advocacy for the real needs, the real things that matter to real providers. We want to deal with stuff like this that actually is important to you guys. So please, please continue to share stuff. We keep a running list of everything, and we will continue to add to it with anything that you send our way. And I think we pretty much wrapped up everything. Definitely keep watching us on Facebook. We post every day. We're going to be rolling out some more video content soon. We're wanting to make the TikTok channel active. We're going to be releasing all of that. So stay tuned. We got a lot more coming. We appreciate you guys, and have a great night. Bye-bye.
The Paramedic AF show is property of the EMS 2.0 project. The beliefs, opinions, and practices discussed in the show are our own and do not represent our respective employers. Please follow your local protocols, policies, and procedures at all times. All listeners are encouraged to research and self-educate regarding all content represented in this show. For more information regarding EMS 2.0, please visit our Facebook page for our website and social media links. Thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to you joining us next time.